an original sound from South Africa, and I'm proud of seeing that.
And it's changing the game, you know.
If we have to talk about the most successful genre to ever come out of South Africa, definitely that title has to go to Amapiano. The genre has done something that hip-hop artists have been trying to do over the last decade, but failed horribly, and they didn't even have to put efforts to do it. The music just did everything all on its own. We can all agree that hip-hop was dominating the last 2 decades, but in South Africa it really peaked around 2014, and nobody could have predicted that hip-hop would perform so poor after COVID. We can say probably it's because of Amapiano and Afropop, and also the changing of system in terms of the introduction of things like TikTok, and even artists becoming independent and no longer wanting to sign with labels anymore. One thing also that a lot of people will never talk about and recognize regarding the hype of hip-hop is the drama and the fights that tends to escalate the majority of the time. You see, no matter how hard you're trying to disagree, hip-hop beefs have brought a lot of clout and attention in the hip-hop community, and those type of negative news are somewhat appealing to the public. Entertainment industries thrive off negative news. Even in your own ordinary life, people tend to talk about negative news more than positive news. That's why I say the beef between AKA and Casper was the biggest thing to ever happen to South African hip-hop. Like for example, Shane Eagle is more talented than both AKA and Casper, but was least talked about in the media unlike both AKA and Casper. I bet till this day, the biggest scandal to ever happen to Shane Eagle is when he showed his dick on Twitter, and that was more talked about more than when he dropped his best album, Yellow, and even when he won Album of the Year at the Summers. You see what I mean? There is something that hip-hop has been trying to do all these years, that Amapiano did in less than 5 years, and that was breaking through the international stage. The last person who is really trying all his best to break this curse is Nasty C, but unfortunately it looks like his efforts are still not enough, even with him signing to Def Jam. You see, when an artist blows up in South Africa, after reaching that major success, they tend to go abroad and make those connections, and most of the time, this affects their clout here in South Africa a lot. We've seen people like Casper having collaborations with artists like Talib Kweli back in 2015, and even getting the guest feature on Talib's free album lead single Fuck the Money, but that wasn't enough. Also him getting features from the likes of The Game, Casey Veggie, DJ Drama, and Black Thought. But this type of collaborations, they tend to make the US artist more relevant and get talked about here in South Africa instead of vice versa. There was a time even artists used to go to US on a radio show hosted by Sway, of which I think it was the only thing that made more difference, unlike when artists tried to make collaborations with other artists. Questa tried with Rick Ross and Wale collaborations, but that only worked on the US artists, but instead of Questa getting clout overseas. Shane tried, but with him it's different, as artists he worked with were on the come up on his project Dark Moonflower. AK and Ricky, on the other hand, they were not that ambitious to make it overseas, unlike other rappers, which worked in their favor because that never killed their momentum and clout in South Africa. But Ricky used to travel a lot overseas before he blew up, and AK only did the Sway in the Morning freestyle, and that's what we got from him. Then came Amapiano, which we saw it grow within South Africa and became an international sound, without artists trying to go abroad and promote their music and themselves. The only people to ever blow up overseas without even trying to promote their stuff was Ladysmith Black Mambazo, who still holds the title of winning the most Grammys in Africa. I don't like Grammys, but that recognition means a lot. And with the help of TikTok, Amapiano's global sound going toe-to-toe with Afropop as popular sounds coming from Africa. And it's even better because even African artists, they are now able to host their own shows and even selling out overseas. And that's big for me. So why did Amapiano formula work but hip-hop failed? The answer is that the sound is authentic. Hip hop is American thing, and also just because you're good in South Africa doesn't mean you're good enough in overseas. And to be popular overseas, it requires more resource and money. That's why even popular artists, they're still broke even when they're famous, because it's expensive to make it as a musician there. Even though there's a lot of platform to express yourself as a musician, and there's a crowd also. And also the good thing that came with Amapiano is that artists don't have to prioritize their clout and their fame here in South Africa at the expense of having to move to overseas to make their name there. They can have both at the same time. As the Latin music industry, they don't have to privatize their language just to be heard. People just love their sound just the way it is, which is what happened to Amapiano. And seeing artists like Vocalist, who till this day still do vernac and rapping in his home language, seems to be what people overseas wanted all along, instead of rapping in English just because they are now international. So that's why Amapiano became a global accepted sound more than South African hip-hop, because of the authenticity and the originality. See you in the next video.
It's our national treasure right now. I think that's our highest export.